William H. Johnson was among the most inventive landscape painters in the first half of the 20th century. In Mountain Lake, we can see how Johnson had become a modernist painter. Although he was born in Florence, South Carolina, Johnson spent almost a decade, between 1930 and 1938, painting landscapes such as Mountain Lake in Scandinavia. Johnson married a Danish woman named Holger Krag, and they lived for several years in Denmark and Norway. As Johnson developed his own distinct method of painting, he gradually abandoned the idea that a painting of a landscape should create a vicarious experience for the viewer. By vicarious experience, I mean a depiction of landscape that the viewer looks at and imagines themselves being in that place. Johnson's painting Mountain Lake is something entirely different. This painting might depict a motif from nature. However, Johnson's application of color, form, and material have a simplicity and therefore an immediacy that creates a direct experience for the viewer. This is a distinctly modernist conception of art, as form and material, rather than as a means of creating an illusion. Johnson's visual language was inspired by Northern European Expressionist artists, such as Ernst Ludwig Kirchner. By selecting a certain point of view, and by densely applying paint in simplified planes of color, Kirchner created a slippage between abstraction and illusion, between motif and material. This painting is not a depiction of a motif. It is an interpretation of the motif. And furthermore, Kirchner's painting makes this visualization of nature an immediate encounter for the viewer. In his painting Road in Mountains, Johnson simplified and abstracted the landscape into areas of material and color. Road in Mountains is less of an illusion of landscape and more of an actual experience of art. When we are looking at Johnson's painting, the intensity and vitality of his application of paint with both a brush and a palette knife translate into a visualization of the spiritual presence that Johnson had perceived when looking at nature. Before concluding our discussion of Johnson's modernist landscapes, we should briefly note how these works relate to paintings such as Café, which is from a later period in his art. In developing his distinct visual language, Johnson had learned how to construct a composition out of flat planes of color. These interconnected planes of color would remain central to Johnson's visual language, even when his art shifted to motifs of African American life. Although Johnson's landscapes are not as well known as his depictions of African American life, works such as Mountain Lake were formative in his development as a modernist painter. Johnson's paintings of the Scandinavian landscape are more than depictions of nature. They are visions of nature that have passed through Johnson's imagination. Having absorbed and adapted aspects of modernist expressionism, Johnson created paintings that have a direct impact on the viewer. Johnson's painting does not depict an experience. His painting is the experience.